Now I've got a little project open here from our +1 jump every second sort of mini series. You can find the link to that in the description or on screen now, and it was a little series we made based on the +1 jump games that were popular. I don't know if they still are, a little while ago. So to get started, I'm going to hit View, Explorer, Properties. I'm going to want the output as well, just in case we get any errors. It's always good to see your output. We are going to add a screen GUI to the starter GUI, and we're going to make a button which we can click to actually buy the coil Game Pass. I'm going to use a coil. You can use whatever you would like. You don't have to give an item. I'm just going to give the example of giving an item. So under starter GUI, I'm going to hit add and add in a screen GUI. I will rename this screen GUI. I will just call it Game Pass GUI. And in here, I'm going to add a button. I'm going to add a text button. You could add an image one if you'd like. I will rename this to just a Game Pass button. Just change the text. Now inside of this button, we are going to add in a local script. The reason it's local is because it's going to run on the client, which means on the player's side. Now in here, we are going to start by accessing the marketplace service and assigning it to a variable. This is where we can access any Game Pass we'd like. So to do that, we'll say marketplace service equals game : get service. And in here, we're going to type the marketplace service in quotation marks. So what this does is it gets the marketplace service, assigns it to a variable which we can use to access throughout the script. Next, we're going to get our Game Pass ID, which we don't know just yet, but we're going to create that in a minute. For now, I'm just going to set that to 1234. We will create the ID very shortly, but what we're going to do is store the ID of our Game Pass to a variable. In case you didn't know, every Game Pass has its own unique ID, and this is how you actually check if the user owns these Game Passes, how you prompt them. So next, we're going to assign the player to a variable. So we just say player equals game.players.localPlayer. The reason we could do this is because we're using a local script. The player is local to this script, if that makes sense. Or should I say the script is local to the player. So that means that this script only exists for this player. It exists for every player, but it's sort of, think of it as being duplicated or cloned and then placed inside each player. And also, I've just noticed my terrible syntax. This is not Java, so we can remove that semicolon at the top. Next, we are going to call a function whenever the button is clicked. So we will say script.parent, because our script.parent, so the parent is the Game Pass button. So we could actually assign this. We could say button equals script.parent. And then we could say button.mouse button one click connect function, and then these parentheses here. Now what this will do is this will call any code here. So this code will be ran whenever the button is clicked. Now mouse button one click means left click. So if you left click on the button, it will call this code. If you do mouse button two click, that's if you right click on the button. But you probably don't want to do that. You probably want them to left click. Now in here, we are going to create a variable. We're going to initialize a variable that is named hasPass, which will store if the user owns the Game Pass or not. So to do that, we'll say local hasPass. And we're not going to set it to false by default, because we're actually going to define this variable in a second in a pcall. So to do that, we'll say local success, message equals pcall and function, and then drop down with these parentheses just like this. Make sure your syntax and capitals and everything are spelled exactly how I do them, or you may encounter errors. So what pcall does is it will call the code in here, this function, which is any of this code, and it does it in something called protected mode. So this means that any error inside the function will not affect the rest of the script. The script won't stop running because there's an error. Instead, it catches the error and returns a status code. So if there is an error, it will tell us, sort of give us an idea of what the error is, but still run the rest of the code. It basically means that any code ran in here, if it goes wrong, it will not affect everything else. For those of you that are maybe familiar with other programming languages, this is very similar to the try-catch statements. that a lot of other languages use, where you try some code. If it doesn't work, you're going to catch it. Same sort of system. Now in here we're going to actually define our hasPass variable. So we're going to say hasPass, and we need to set this equal to the value to true or false, depending on if the user owns the Game Pass or not. So to do this, we'll say marketplace service colon user owns Game Pass async. In here we need to put our user ID. So every player has their own user ID. To do that, we'll just say player, which is this variable we just defined up here, dot user ID. And we also need to pass in the Game Pass ID, because we want to check if they have that Game Pass. Now we need to check if they do not own the Game Pass. We need to prompt the purchase, because if they don't own it, we want them to buy it, and that's what we want the button to do. We want it to prompt the Game Pass purchase. So we'll say if hasPass equals false, because you have to use two equals in an if statement, then marketplace service colon prompts Game Pass purchase, not prompt purchase, prompt Game Pass purchase, player.user ID, and then the Game Pass ID. And what this does is it prompts the Game Pass purchase to the user. Now let's go and actually create the Game Pass. You want to go and head on over to create.roblox.com, and you want to head down to creations. Next you want to click on your game, so you want to find your game and click on it. And then under monetization, which is here, under monetization you want to hit passes and click create a pass. I'm going to give it a name. I'll call this gravity coil, and I'm going to leave out a description, and I can hit create pass. So once you've created it, you want to click the Game Pass, go to sales, turn on an item for sale, and put in the amount of Robux you want it to cost. And then you can hit save changes. Now, when we go back to our passes screen, under our Game Pass, we can hit the three dots and hit copy asset ID. It should say at the bottom, asset ID has been copied successfully. Once you've seen that, we can go back to our local script and replace our Game Pass ID, our 1234, and paste in the ID we've just copied. Don't use this ID here, because this will be my Game Pass. So the best way to test this, because when you create a Game Pass, you yourself will already own it. Unless it's a group Game Pass, you won't own it. The best way to test this is to use another Game Pass ID. So the best way I would test this would be to go to Roblox, find a random game. So I'm going to go to this Reborn as Swordsman. Hope it has a Game Pass. If it doesn't, you have to go to a different game. Go to store. Yes, it has Game Passes, so that's great. I'm going to get this Magic Eggs pass. Just find a random Game Pass off a random game you do not own. Copy the ID in the URL, which is this one here. This is a string of numbers. Go back to your Roblox game, into your local script, and replace the game ID. So we can comment out our code using two dashes. And then just before, we'll paste in this random code on a Game Pass we don't own. Now if we hit test and play, it will prompt us to purchase. Should do if it works, which it doesn't actually work, so that's brilliant. Unable to cast value to object. Let's have a look at that. So it tells us it's on line 15, which is this one here. Unable to cast value to object. Okay, so I've just done a bit of research, and it's actually a mistake I made. I do apologise. It's not .user ID. We just need to pass in the player. I thought we had to pass in a player ID, but it's actually just the player that we need to pass in. So we can remove that .user ID. Now if we hit test and play and hit buy Game Pass, there we go, it prompts it. You can buy it, it will not charge you actual Robux. It even says here, this is a test purchase, your account will not be charged. Whenever you test Game Passes or developer products in Roblox Studio, you will not be charged. Anyway, now that we know that prompt, we can put it back to our original code. Now if we hit test and play when we actually own it, we see it does nothing. Do be aware, if you're testing and you actually and you don't own a Game Pass and you're testing in Studio and you buy it, unless you have a Boolean variable to say whether or not you own the Game Pass, you will not actually have the Game Pass. It's a bit strange how it works. It sort of removes the Game Pass straight away, so you don't permanently own it throughout the testing. They might have changed that now, but when testing a Game Pass, make sure you own it. Okay, so now what we need to do is we've got our client script, but we actually need a server script. So under server script service, I'm going to add in a script. I will rename this to Gamepass, and in here we are going to, first we're going to get our marketplace service again. So I don't need to go over this again, but just get our service, marketplace service. Now we also need the replicated storage. So I'm going to say replicated storage equals game:get service replicated storage. And we use this to access our replicated storage, which is this one here. Now the reason we're going to get our replicated storage is because we need to go under view, and I'm going to go to toolbox and search gravity coil. I'm going to click that, click OK. No, I'm not going to put it in the starter pack, just because if you put it in starter pack, it will automatically go in the player's backpack when you start. I'm going to drag it into replicated storage, because this is where we're going to store the Gamepass, the gravity coil. We only want to store it unless the player owns the Gamepass. Now we need our Gamepass ID. So again, Gamepass ID equals, and then your ID. This is my ID. I'm just going to copy and paste it off the screen. Make sure you put in your ID. Now what we need to do is call a function whenever a new player joins the game. To do that, we say game.players.playerAdded::connect function. And we pass to this function the player. I'm going to use PLR for short, just stands for player. And this is called whenever a new player joins the game. Now, once the players join the game, we need to call another function whenever the player's character is added. This includes after the character dies and respawns. So the character is like the physical, the object of the player. So whenever that is loaded, we need to call code, which is going to check if the user owns the Gamepass, because whenever they die, they're going to lose the gravity coil. So when they respawn, we need to put it back in their backpack. I hope that makes a bit of sense. So what we'll use is player.characterAdded::connect function, and we're passing in the character. So I'm going to use char or char for short, and this is called whenever the player's character is added. Now I'm just going to wait 1 second. This just allows the character to load in fully. This can be skipped, but I do recommend it. Now we need to check if the user owns the Gamepass with the ID we assigned to the Gamepass ID variable. So to do that, we'll say if marketplace service :user owns Gamepass async, passing in the player .user ID. This is where we use the user ID and not the player. That's where I was getting confused. This one we just want the ID, not the actual player. And we pass in the Gamepass ID. So if the user owns this Gamepass, we then just say then. We need to clone the gravity coil in the replicated storage, because we want to put it inside the player. So just say local clone equals replicated storage dot gravity coil : clone. And now we just need to put the clone in the backpack, the player's backpack. So we say clone.parent equals player.backpack. Just like that. Yeah, this is how you add an item. If you wanted to do something else, obviously you'd have to program that. But if you leave stuff in the comments, I won't be able to help. But it's really straightforward. Basically, you put your code in here. If it's not an item, so you don't need it to go in their backpack every time they respawn, you wouldn't put this in your character added, maybe just a player added. Now we can close both of them scripts up and actually test the game. So we do own the Gamepass, so we've got the gravity coil, and then you see it works, and I jump very high because of my jump power as well. And if we hit buy Gamepass, it doesn't do anything. If we die, you'll see it will put the Gamepass back into our inventory. After a second, there we go, it's back, and we can use it again. And that is how you make Gamepasses. It is that easy, really. I know this was quite a long video, just explaining things, but I hope it helped. I hope you sort of know what you're doing now. If you need any help, let me know in the comments. I'll try and reply to everyone that I can. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video, everyone. Goodbye.